I hope to convince you that free will is an illusion. And it's worse than an illusion. It's actually a totally incoherent idea, which is to say it's impossible to describe a universe in which it could be true. Not only is it untrue, it's hard to make sense of what's even being claimed to be true. Now, the popular conception of free will seems to rest on two assumptions. The first is that each of us was free to behave differently than we did in the past. You became a fireman, and yet you could have become a policeman. You chose chocolate, but you could have chosen vanilla. It certainly seems like this is the world we're living in. The second assumption is that we are the conscious source of our thoughts and actions. Your experience of wanting to do something is, in fact, the proximate cause of your doing that something. You feel that you want to move, and then you move. You are doing it. You, the conscious witness of your life. Now, unfortunately, we know that both of these assumptions are just untrue. The first problem is that we live in a world of cause and effect, and there's no way of thinking about cause and effect that allows us to say that the buck stops here. The buck never stops. Either our wills are determined by prior causes, a long chain of prior causes, and we're not responsible for them, or they're the product of chance, and we're not responsible for them, or there's some combination of chance and determinism. But no combination seems to give you the free will that people cherish. Now, you could consider a generic serial killer. His choice to commit his last murder was determined by neurophysiological events in his brain, which were in turn determined by prior causes. Bad genes, the developmental effects of an unhappy childhood, a night of lost sleep because a car alarm was going off down the street. These events precede any conscious decision to act. So what does it mean to say that this murderer committed his crime of his own free will? If this statement means anything, it must mean that he could have behaved differently. He could have resisted the impulse to commit the murder, or he could have declined to feel the impulse altogether. And not on the basis of some random influences over which he had no conscious control, but because he was actually the conscious author of his thoughts and actions. Now, the problem is no one has been able to describe a way in which mental and physical events could arise that would make sense of this claim of freedom. Now, when we assume that violent criminals have such freedom, of course, we reflexively blame them for their actions. But when we look at this wider net of causality, the basis for placing blame seems to evaporate. The moment we catch sight of a stream of causes that reach back into childhood and beyond, the sense of his culpability begins to disappear. And to say that he would have done otherwise, or could have done otherwise, had he chosen to, is simply to say he would have lived in a different universe had he been in a different universe. Now, as sickening as I might find such a person's behavior, I have to admit that if I were to trade places with him, atom for atom, I would be him. There's no extra part of me that could resist the impulse to victimize innocent people. And even if you believe that every one of us harbors an immortal soul, this problem of responsibility remains. I cannot take credit for the fact that I don't have the soul of a psychopath. So if I had truly been in this person's shoes, if I had his genes and life experience and an identical brain or an identical soul in an identical state, I would have behaved as he did, and for the same reasons. That nobody picks their parents or the society into which they were born. Nobody picks the life influences that shape the development of their nervous system. You are no more responsible for the microstructure of your brain at this moment than you are for your height. So the role of luck in our lives appears decisive. One has to be very unlucky to have the mind and brain of a psychopath.